Hello, it's Scott Claus here with CG Spectrum and talking tonight about 2D animation. Doing something a little different tonight. It's tonight here. I'm doing a little bit something different. I'm going to talk about limited animation. I've talked about this before and I did some demos of it, but I don't know that I actually did a really exciting job of that. And tonight I have something I think that's going to be kind of fun. Well, depending on how you look at it, it might be fun for you. It may be troublesome for me. But before we get started, I always like to ask and make sure that everyone can see, they can hear, that everything's working well, because there's always technical stuff, like if you can hear sounds that aren't supposed to be there, for example, and other things. So I always like to just double check and also see if comments are working. So I can see if anybody has anything fun to say. Then I can check out comments and such and hold a dialogue with you. As always, I'm always happy to talk to people and answer questions if they have any, and talk about any old thing that is on your mind today, preferably in the world of animation. But I won't argue too much if you want to talk about how you want to get a job and what are some things that you can keep in mind when you're looking for work and all that portfolio stuff. I'm always more than happy to talk about those things. But on my end, at least, the topic for the day is going to be cutout and rigged things. And some of the things that come into play when you're dealing with limited animation, which I think of as being television stuff, but I also think of being my own work. But I've done that before, so that's the difference. Is today I'm going to be talking about what are some of the things you'd use on a production. And so I've got some really cool rigs that I've set up to play with and talk about a little bit. So I'm just going to introduce some of my friends. Like I said, maybe it'll be fun for you, maybe it'll be awful for me, but I'll start taking over my universe. But we'll start with this one. These characters were actually designed by Brandon, who is a concept artist at thanks Dorado, who's a concept artist at CG Spectrum, does very popular concept art classes, and just an amazing artist who also does streams and comes up with some wonderful artwork every week. And so there was a CG Spectrum project that was happening with a game. And so Brandon came up with all these cool designs, and then I was tasked with animating them, but doing them in a way that's a little bit different. Ordinarily, one might just draw every single frame, and then that's how you're going to animate a character. But in this case, which is often the case for limited animation shows, and in my case for shorts where I've done everything myself, you have to think economy, and you have to think, well, what's the best effect I can get with the least amount of need, with the least amount of energy, because you just don't have all the time and energy in the world when you're working by yourself. So I'll show you how I created these characters once I've introduced them all, but I just wanted to set it up by saying, yeah, Brandon designed them, and then I colored them and animated them. So let's look at another one. Well, there you go. So there's a repulsive looking thing. Well, I don't know. It's maybe it's gross to some, maybe it isn't to others. But I think they're cool. They're really awesome. They remind me of a toy that I collected at some point at the end of the 80s. They had them at Toys R Us. They were called Germs. And they came in little petri dishes, the little things that scientists use. I can't think right now, but anyway, the little measuring cylinders that you use in science, and they were called Germs, and these kind of remind me of that. Anyway, there's a couple of them. Let me introduce another one. I don't have names for these. Feel free to name them if you like. Anybody who's out there watching, feel free to. I'm going to watch my head here. It's going to get me Feel free to name them or come up with whatever they are and what they do. They are technically aliens who've come in to invade us. Beyond that, I haven't got a clue. So feel free to take ownership of these things. In fact, take them away. They're aliens. Yeah, hey, Sean. Nice to see you again. Thanks for stopping by. Yes, so I was explaining, these are alien fiends that have come, and I don't think there's anything good going to come about it, but you never know. Maybe they're benevolent, maybe they're friends. So here's another one. So like I said, I don't know what they are. I don't know what their purpose is or what manner of creature they even are. I just know that they're here and they refuse to go away. So I guess we're gonna have to deal with it. Here is another one. One looks like it may need to see an optometrist, huh? And again, I gotta move out of the way or they're gonna get me. The green's a virus, is it? Simon, these are Brandon designs, and I was very pleased to work on these things for the high school project that we did with CG Spectrum. And part of that project was just talking about limited animation. How can you do things on a budget and do things with limited energy? And so again, Brandon designed these from CG Spectrum, and then I took them and created creatures that move. Now theoretically, I would have had these things moving across the screen and floating around doing stuff. I didn't quite get to that. I'll show that some other time maybe. I figured it was enough. At least this way you get a nice good look at them and you can sit and watch their cycles. Each one of them cycles. But you can imagine if I were to grab, one of them and make it crawling across the screen or something. Maybe another time I'll do that. I mean, I'm doing it right now, but it's not animated that way. It's just I'm just moving it around. But that was what they were for. I mean, that's how I designed them, so that you could populate a scene and have, maybe this one floating up the screen as it goes, just sort of lazily making its way through a scene, like you're looking at a fish tank, or maybe it'd go back and forth across the screen and then leave and come back or something. Like I said, I didn't really bother with that for today, but that is one of the things that you can do with this style of limited animation, which again, I'm going to show you how I did it, how these things are built and set up, in case you are interested in doing it yourself and want to have some fun. Last but not least, I have this one. I'm not as happy with this one because you can see it exists in its own square of gray, which wasn't intended, but I just ran out of time. Anyway, so that's, yeah, but these guys look cool. First and foremost, you can, again, thank Brandon. He's the one who designed them. I just was following in his footsteps. I colored them and broke them into pieces so that they would animate. But when I first saw these things, I said, oh, well, we have some ideas for creatures, for space creatures for this project we were working on. I was just blown away. I was just, they're so fun and gross but designy, cool. And so it was a real pleasure to color stylism. And I used CG Spectrum colors. I don't know if you can see here, but the idea was to use, get this out of the way, to use, I mean, it's CG Spectrum, which means basically every color, right? So, but the emblem here is kind of specific colors. And so I used that as a starting point for what some of the creature colors would be. And there's another one. It's yellow. Unfortunately, it looks a little bit like something that's been floating around since March or thereabouts. And so we decided it wasn't in the best taste to use that specific shape. Basically, it was a COVID shape. So that one, I just left that off. We don't want to offend anyone or remind anyone of anything unpleasant right now. It was, I think, designed before we knew how serious it all was. But anyway, there's a yellow one as well. Anyway, so these are my 6 friends. I hope they're friendly. I hope they come in peace. And so, yeah, I thought you'd get a kick out of that, Simon. Anyway, so yeah, so what I'm going to do, like I said, is I'm just going to talk about these things, how I created them. I'll show you, I'll go through each scene and show you how they came to be, and how you too could come up with these if you like. And like I said, if you have any questions at any time, don't be shy. Please feel free to ask me if I'm not talking about something you're interested in. Just get me started. If you've been to one of my streams before, you know it's easy to set me off, and I'll just go on and on and on about stuff. So if you're interested in something, be warned, or go for it. All right, so let's put my friends away for just a minute, and we'll go to a work screen. And let me fill this out a little bit so it's there's not a lot of real estate on my screen, but it should work pretty good. So I will just start by playing this thing. So you already saw, well, it's just playing the end of it. You already saw how it looked. So we'll start by just playing the whole thing in this program. So this program is Animate CC. It used to be called Flash. They used to offer, Adobe offered Flash, and it was used for many years for web cartoons. I remember it must have been, I don't know, around 1999, 2000, there was a big push to do web cartoons. Maybe you've seen Happy Tree Friends. I think that's one of the ones that ended up being pretty successful, and still wildly repulsive even today, and awfully cute at the same time. But these were cartoons that you would watch online. They were pushing to come up with a way to get cartoon material, product, whatever you want to call it, online, and they were using Flash, which was a limited vector-based way of creating content that would be directly exported to the web. And something funny happened over the years that didn't really take off. Well, if you remember it, Simon, if you remember it, you may remember that you had to wait and wait and wait and wait for the content to load up, and then you'd watch the cartoon, and often as not, it'd be 30 seconds. It wouldn't even be that funny sometimes. The sound wouldn't be too nice. The picture quality would be pretty low, and the image would be about as big as I am on the screen right now. And you'd watch these cartoons, and if it was Happy Tree Friends, it would be a lot of fun. I think when these first started, you'd have to watch them in episodes, and so you'd have to watch a couple of them to get to the gory stuff at the end, and security updates. Yeah. Anyway, so Flash, which was solely, I mean, as far as I know, was solely created for that sort of thing, and for web design even, was phased out, as was, I believe, Dreamweaver and other sort of web cartoon things. And you know, they started using it exclusively for TV animation for a long time. Well, I think what they figured out, I don't have anybody's word on this, but I think they figured out, well, if we're not doing this for online, and they did. Oh, interesting. But I think they figured out, well, if we're not going to do this exclusively for online content, if we can actually use this for actual TV shows. And slowly but surely it became a way of animating things for limited animation TV shows. I believe, and you can correct me on this, Simon, or whoever, if you know the answer to this, but I believe that, yeah, sorry, JD, yeah, Dreamweaver, who's, I believe that South Park uses something similar to Animate CC if they don't actually use Animate CC, Creative Cloud. If they don't use it, they use something similar where they're able to take images that you do one time, and then you move them across the screen and have them bounce. I mean, originally, the first one at least, they did actually use cutout stuff where they cut out characters and animated them by hand, frame by frame. But eventually, I believe they used cutouts that were transferred as vector images into either Flash or Animate CC or something similar. And I've been doing it that way ever since. Yeah, okay, well, maybe they use Maya. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's absolutely possible. But a lot of people are now using, if not Animate CC, a lot of programs like this to do this sort of look, this vector-based stuff, where a lot of things are staying constant on the screen, and the parts that are moving are the only parts that animate. And yeah, that is surprising. And to talk about that, that's intriguing. But it makes sense. I mean, thinking back, I mean, if you look at it, it does make sense that you could do it. So why wouldn't you? And it gives you a lot more freedom. Yeah, so the game with limited animation is well, how can you make it as nice and fluid as you possibly can with while you're still working economically, while you're still doing things that are simple to set up and simple to be manipulated. And so one of the things that you can do is make a distinction about what is going to be on screen for how long, what's going to move, what isn't going to move. And so the main thing that you have to remember when you're doing this sort of animation is you just have to plan ahead. So I looked at this, I'm not sure if I have the original drawings, I should have them around somewhere, but I looked at the original drawings and made a determination about, well, what can they do? What should they do? Let me see if I can find that so you can actually look at it right now. So here's everybody. Well, now you can see the one that's been censored. The one in the lower right-hand corner, number 6, that one is the one that we mixed. But the first thing that I did was that I actually created, a look for all of them so that they kind of were all coordinated with these bright cartoony colors. And then based on that, I thought, well, what are they going to be able to do? How can they move? And the one up in the top left corner obviously looked like it was sort of squid-like, horrific. So I thought, well, I'll give it squid legs. The second, number 2, looked like there was kind of a robotic crab thing. So I thought, well, I'll make that one a crab. And then the third one, there's not too much that looks like it can move on there, so probably the eyes and maybe the mouth. The fourth one, same thing, just the eyes and the mouth. Then the fifth one, I wanted to specifically come up with something that has rotational body parts, because, and then 6, I never got to it. So, but because with number 5, that's what you see a lot in animation today, are animation rigs. So I'm going to show you a very simple way to do an animation rig in Animate CC. It's gotten so much more sophisticated than what I'm going to show you, but I'm not quite ready to show you. As it happens, we're developing something right now with designs done by Brandon from CG Spectrum, where we actually have animation rigs that are set up in Toon Boom that can be animated in the same way you would find in a lot of animation programs that are CG based, like Maya, for example, Cinema 4D, which I also work in, and other programs. So anyway, because you're actually taking a rig, a character that has been rigged with joints and bones and can be stretched and pulled and squashed and stretched as well. So I'll talk about that a little more when we've got that up and running. So for today, I thought it would be fun. I mean, these were developed for high school students. I thought it'd be fun to talk about something very simple that you can do at home if you're interested, as long as you have the Adobe Suite and have some imagination and creativity about how to set things up. So again, this was all just looking at these characters that I've been given and going, well, what can I do with them? And how can I make them move before I even started messing around with them? I mean, you're seeing the final color. I don't even think I did the color first. I just looked at the drawings, which unfortunately I don't have right in front of me, and said, okay, what am I going to do with these? And based on that, I decided how I would animate them. All right, so let's look at this one first and look at, first of all, the different layers. I will start by just turning layers on and off, and you can see if I break it down that each layer is separated. And so if you look at the body layer, and boy is it important to stay organized when you're doing this sort of thing. You can wing it and then you can put it all together later, but if you have a sense for this sort of organization, you'll know that, well, the body is going to be on this layer, the eyes are going to be on top of that layer. If I zoom in really tight, let's go into full on 200, You can see that the eyes connect to the body. If I hide those eyes, you can see that they had to go on top. That's the only way that it would work and look like they are actually sitting kind of in front, sort of foreshortened in front of the antennae. If I move them, I'll just do that right now so you can see what I mean. If I move them below, it doesn't make a big, huge difference, but you can maybe see that the line underneath changed a little bit. It'll make a bigger difference when you see the animation. I'll do this again. But let's see if maybe the legs, if that makes a difference. If I put the, well, they're not on. If I put the legs in front, maybe you can see the difference a little more obviously. So there you can see there's that purple line that separates the legs from the body, and the lines of the legs I didn't draw them all the way to the top because I knew I didn't need to, because I knew the legs would be behind the body and it would look like this when it was done. Nice and clean and neat and everything lined up so that it looks just like the original drawing when you put it all together, like so. So the first thing I did was I started with the legs because I figured that would be the most straightforward. I knew for a fact that I wanted the legs to animate in a traditional sense. So I just hand animated it. I just went through and I drew the first pose, and then I drew the final pose, which is this one. And I only had to do from the part where they go down. Let's see, I looked at this. From the part that they went down, what they started until they went down. So first frame and then last frame, and then I just had to do in-betweens. And that's just turning on the onion skin and looking at the in-betweens that way. So it's not going to look too nice because it's already been colored in, but it might not look at all. This onion skin isn't. Let me choose the actual frames and see if that'll do it. Well, trust me on this one. You just have to turn on the onion skin and then in between it, just like you would anything else. So if I scrub through this, you can see what each of the legs is doing. And they're not even that nice of in-betweens. You can see I kind of biffed it in a couple places. It doesn't really show. I did a lot of copy and pasting because these are vector-based. It was easy for me to copy and paste them. Let me see if I can mess it up a little bit. There you go. So if I go in here and get a little bit tighter, you can see that I could take these drawings and move them. I could take an edge of the drawing and move just that. Let's see if I can do that. It's kind of fun. There you go. So I can move little pieces of the leg. So I was able to do a really easy copy and paste to get the legs to animate the way that you see them in the final analysis. But it was done by hand. Every frame was drawn individually. A lot of copy and pasting, but it was still drawn individually. And that's not the most effective way to work in Flash. If you're going to do that, you might as well use TV Paint or Toon Boom or something and do it that way. Flash does vector drawing really well, and vector drawing is reusing things and copying and pasting a lot and doing things on the cheap and as fast as you can. But so I brought the frame, did all the frames for the legs going down, and then I brought the legs back up but did it slower. So if you see my timeline, if I can expand a little bit, you'll see that I kept 2 frames for each of the legs coming back up. Whereas on the way down, it's 1 frame. And so this gives you the look of, it goes to squishes, actually to squishes, and then it pulls up slowly and squishes and pulls up slowly. Where did I get the idea for that? Well, I just have watched jellyfish and squishy things as they're squishing around through the water. And that's how I kind of came up with that timing. So now if I just play just that layer all by itself, you will hopefully see that the animation of the legs works on its own. So that's just a cycle of the legs going down and then coming up. They go down fast, they come up a little bit slower, and it will just do that forever, never, never, never. Once I had that, which was already based on the body, which I know wasn't going to do anything, So I could put that together with the body. And you can see now that you know, the legs are connected to the body, and they look like they're actually rotating out from it, you know, squishing down and squishing back up again. Then I worked on the eyes, and I wanted this very specific look for the eyes. I'll play it first, and I'll show you how I did it. There's a very specific look to the eyes that they would dart around really fast. Again, this is the look of 2D animation. If you think about it, I'm thinking of a lot of really old references, but what is it? Is Perry the Platypus? I was just looking at this with a student recently. Is it Phineas and Ferb? Or, there's been a lot of, there are a lot of shows running right now, but even things like Family Guy. I don't know. There's maybe you guys can help me out and think of some cool TV-based limited animation shows, but where they've got this very direct boom, boom, boom. Things go up, down. There's no overlap. There's no follow through. There's no look. I'm looking like a conductor, right? But there's nothing flourishy about it. It's all just from one post to the next, up, down, over, left, right, and that's what I wanted for the eyes. And so the timing of it, I put it on 4s a lot. I had a lot of holds, and then it would just dash from one pose to the next without any anticipation at all, and only a little bit of overlap. You can see there's the overlap and follow through as the eye expands. It hits its mark and then bounces right back in again. But everything was done by copying and pasting and then pulling on the edges of the individual pieces of the eye. So for example, if I just grab this, if I unlock it, if I grab one of the eyes, I can just pull on the eye like that, and I can make it do anything I want, and then lock that in with a frame, and then go on to the next frame, you know, and do the same thing. And by animating that way, I got the zippy look that I wanted. So there you can see. Now it's not going to look quite right. It may look fun anyway. I'll just play it just for laughs. But you can see those frames that I used, that I just created just now with the kind of wonkiness. So that's all there was to it. And that is what you're trying to do with this sort of animation always, is economy, using the limitations that you're up against, which are you don't want to draw every single frame, or you can't draw every single frame because you just don't have the strength or the time or the money or whatever it takes. And so you come up with these time-saving ways of animating, and Flash is well suited for that sort of thing. A lot of copying, a lot of pasting, a lot of pulling, resizing, and dragging things around. And then you get results very quickly, and a style that's very specific to this sort of animating. The eyes, you can see that they're just the pupils stretched out. All I did was I just took them and did what I've been doing with everything else, and just pull on them, and that's how I got them to exaggerate. I exaggerated them because they're moving so fast. They go from here to there, that if I just did it as a sphere, which is what they started out as, you wouldn't see it, or you'd see it and it'd look real choppy. You can try and push them back and see if I can do this. I don't know if it's worth going on and on about. And trust me when I say that they started out as spheres, and it's not going to work. They started out as spheres, and if they were spheres again, it would look really choppy. But because they have that exaggeration, then they look like it's the people darting from one side to the other. It's essentially a motion blur or a smear frame that you'd see in live action. But I just drew it instead of doing it with a setting. So here you can see this eye. It started out in the lower left, and then it goes really quickly across the screen. It overextends a little bit, and then it bounces back into place. And that's how you get that snappy look that makes the eyes look kind of rubbery and elastic. And so all done very simply, all done very quickly, but you had to think about it a little bit. You had to set it up. And what's the timing? You know, how do I know how long to hold the eyes? In this case, I don't even know how many frames. It goes from what, 70 to about 100 and something. I just experimented with it. But when you're using a program like Animate CC, you can try things out very quickly and then just take these frames, you know, take all of these, grab them as a unit, and then shorten the amount of time that they were on screen. Let's see if I can do this real quick. You know, just grab them as a unit and then bam, now it's doing it sooner. Now it's not doing it where it was before. I just dragged them and then they're moving faster. So it was very easy to play with the timing on this and come up with the results that I wanted, which were this kind of alien but cartoony, funny look. So here's another one. In fact, this is the first time that the eyes move. They are on screen for about 30 frames, which is around a second long, and then they just dart immediately over to the side, overextend a little bit, and then bounce back, and that gives you that rubbery look. And notice that I drew not only the eyeballs, but the little lids underneath. It'd be fun to try and make these things blink, but I just didn't, not this time around. But it would be very easy to make this thing blink, and it looked really funny. But anyway, so it darts down, and it darts up, and then it darts back to center. It's a cycle, so it has to end on the exact same frame that it started. So that's really important with these guys. They were cycles. They had to repeat over and over. So whenever you do a cycle, the first frame and the last frame have to be exactly the same. If you're doing something like a walk, then the middle frame also has to be exactly the same, but flipped. And that's how you get the idea that the legs are moving forward and they're switching places like so. With this, I didn't have to worry about that. It's just one extended cycle that repeats over and over. But I thought 3 different eye looks, actually I guess it's 2 looks, and then a return to 0. So it's 3 eye positions was more than enough and got the idea across. And it was just a matter of playing around with the timing. But just for the record, just as a reminder, yeah, the legs are also a cycle. That's frame 1. They go down into this pose, and then they kind of come up a little more slowly back into their original pose. So whatever frame this is exactly the same as frame 1. So you can see, well, not exactly. There you go. So the cycle goes from this frame to this frame. That is the entirety of the cycle. And all I had to do was copy and paste that, and then I got it going the entire time that the eyes were doing their thing. I just had to make sure and end at the right place so that it would start all over again without any hitches. If you don't have the first frame and the last frame matched up so that it goes right back into its cycle, you're going to get hitches and pops and funny things are going to happen. And you'll see that one of them, it's set up that way. The blue thing that looks like a crab, it actually has a little bit of a hitch in it, and that's good. So I can show you the dangers of not having everything lined up. But when we're done, if I put this back to full frame again and I play this, then in theory, it's a cycle. And the way it's set up is if I want to, then I can group all of these layers into one unit, and then that gives me the ability to move the whole thing as a single unit. I don't think I can do it now because I didn't. This is not actually set up for playing with. I set them up for the high school students so that they could play with them and not break anything. This one is currently not set up for that. This is just the animation. But the idea is basically it moves as a unit. I set up a hierarchy that's like an overriding control, which is basically the body. And then this thing can be moved around willy-nilly and will keep doing its animation. It could also be rotated as a unit. There we go, there's the control. So I could rotate it. And I have one somewhere, I just don't remember where it is, where it's animating around and it's moving in kind of a little figure 8 circle. And so it's very easy to do that. Set keys on not only the individual parts, but on this overriding control, this center control. And the way that Animate CC is set up, most programs are too, is I can move that center pivot so that it'll rotate from wherever I want it to. So if I wanted to have more of a bell ringing effect, it could do that. But that's not what I was interested in for this one. I was happy enough just to have it rotating from the center, and so you could animate it so that it's bobbing around in a scene and doing fun things. So that's basically this purple one. I'll lock everything up again so I don't mess it up. And then all I had to do was render this out so that the background was translucent, which is basically just settings that you do when you're rendering out a shot like this. And for the purposes of putting it into the program I'm using, which is OBS, I just had to make a layer and then stick it on the layer. Like I said, I would probably animate it so that it moves throughout the scene if I had more time and felt like it. But at least you get the idea. So I'm just going to go back to that real quick so you can see it. The final product, there it is. And like I said, I could animate it so it's bobbing around and doing things, funny stuff. And maybe I'll do that sometime in the future when I have a little more time. But at the very least, you can see how I could have it bobbing throughout the scene. And you can imagine too, I could add effects to it. So the little bubbles are flying around and all sorts of crazy things. And really, it didn't take me that long. It took me a while because I wanted it to look nice. But you know, as far as the colors and things, you know, I put some thought into it. But really, it was 4 colors, 2 shades of purple and 2 shades of purple and 1 yellow. And just had to color in each of the individual frames for the legs, which took a long time. So when I was doing the legs themselves, I had to color every single one of these frames of it going down. But then I just copied and pasted it so they're going back up again. And then that was it. They were done. And then doing the body, which again, you know, it's just 2 colors and nothing's moving. So I only had to do 1 frame and held it. You can see that on my screen. The body holds the entire length of the timeline. And then each of the eyes are on their same frame setup. So they change 3 times, but it's just 2 frames in between. And all I had to do was color the yellow eyes and then stick the pupils on top of that. So if I just play it now one last time, you can see that that is the finished product for this little purple thing. So anyway, there you go. That is first alien. Just checking a couple things, seeing if anybody's commenting on stuff. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Sometimes I miss some of the content comments when they are on other screens. So yeah, so I will consider animating it around the screen. I'm considering coming up with something a little more epic. We shall see in the near future, time permitting, if I can come up with something that's a little bit more crazy. Right now, I just want to make sure that I'm picking up. I think I've missed a couple comments. Just want to make sure I turn the volume off for this. There we go. So cool. You know, it's like credits, animations on films. Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. That it looks, they use this look for credits on films sometimes now for just simple stuff that's just kind of fun and silly and not necessarily supposed to look like really heavy, fully fleshed out animation, which is what I usually talk about. But anyway, so there is round 1. So each one of them is going to get a little bit easier and more simple. I started with the most complex one. That one I actually did some full animation, frame by frame, keyframe animation we often call it. And the next one will not have that at all. So once again, I'm doing this with Animate CC. It isn't the only program you can do this with. In future streams, hopefully I'll be able to show off how we can do this with Toon Boom, which is what we used in our classes in CG Spectrum. But that's a little more complicated, and I wanted to focus on immediate results today. That was kind of part of the fun of this, was you can do this stuff really quickly and simply, and that's part of the joy. Is we too often with animation you get bogged down, you've just got to draw every single frame, and it can be really wearisome to go on and on and on. And in order to make it look nice, you spend hours and hours and hours drawing, and then more hours cleaning stuff up. And I wanted to offer an alternative just for laughs. Here are some of, here's a page of Brandon's drawings. I think it's worth pointing this out. I'm gonna get rid of everything except his drawings because it's really fun. Like I said, I was just delighted when I first found these. I'm never going to get this together, but first thing that I did was I just brought down the opacity. Oh, there it is. I'll bring the opacity up so you can see them in all their glory. So that's what they looked like when I got them. In fact, I will bring it down even further because it's a lot of stuff. So these were, I think in CG, maybe you can correct me on this, Simon, but I believe they were going to make these into CG, and then they were going to animate them so they popped on the screen from pellets. It was a game, so I think they either died or they came to life starting as pellets, and I'm not even sure these were final. They were just works in progress, but I was like, let me at them. I'll have lots of fun with these. And so, and I'm not even sure I'm supposed to be showing these, but I just thought they were really cool. I don't think they're hurting anything to share these things that we had worked on. If it is, it's too late. Anyway, so these were how they looked when I got them. They were really cool pencil sketches. I'll zoom in on them a little tighter so you can see how really how much work went into them, how much detail. And I spent a lot of years as a cleanup artist, and so I'm on my home turf when I'm doing cleanup stuff. It's something I'm very comfortable doing, and I actually get a lot of joy out of. I mean, I love all motion graphics, but I always enjoyed doing cleanup work, and I think I got pretty good at it. Was in demand there for a while. But anyway, so that's what I was working with, and I wanted to keep the integrity of it, but also, editorialize and make it move. And so the first thing I did was, let's knock this down, was I just traced out the body. I already knew that I was going to make separate parts for the legs, but I wasn't sure quite how. Would I do it all as one piece, or would there actually be two pieces for the upper leg and the lower leg? So if I remember right, I ended up doing separate parts for the upper and the lower. Let's take a look. So first of all, the body. If it's around, maybe it isn't. Let's turn on everything. There we go. It's all on one piece. Oh, so this is, yeah, it's not going to work. So basically, I turned this into an armature eventually. And by armature, it means that I could animate the whole thing using less keys. I'm not going to go into that too much. It's too much to go into. It's very technical, and it's not fun, and I'm sure I'll break something or other. But what you're looking at is basically the legs already broken down and animated. And so you can see that I broke them down into the upper and the lower, and then put them on a separate layer that's an armature that you basically just animate it like a puppet. I will set a key or two here, see if I can do that. But it's all based on rotations. And so if I click on here, I can break this up and do some wacky stuff to it, and you'll see how it works. Maybe even keys. Yeah, there you go. So you can see that on this one frame, the leg pops up like that. So basically the animation for this was just going through and grabbing each unit of the leg, which I'd already set up in advance. I'll open that one in a sec, I have it handy. But going through with each part of the leg, which has been joined with an armature. You can see it here on the screen. If I zoom in a little tighter, you can see that pink line on the screen. And when I rotate this, it goes away. But if I select it all, you can see it better. that is a line that's been drawn from the center of the character's body outward that turns it into a type of skeleton rig, basically skeleton just like you have inside yourself, which most of us who worked with animation, we know all about skeletons. But for the one person out there who's never seen any of this before, you create a skeleton underneath the skin of a character, and it's just like a real skeleton with muscles, and it attaches things so that when I move this, let's see if this is working. If I translate it, theoretically, yeah, it's going to snap right back, or it can be stretched so that I can animate this any old which way. There are no parameters on it, but its home position is best, and its best is just rotate it. That's the way that this rig was designed to be. But theoretically, I could translate it. It's just going to break. But it's a series of joints that connect the body and the legs. So if I grab this one, I'm rotating the joint like so. And if I grab this one like so. Now, again, I know that there's a way to set up hierarchy, but I think you just select them. And that doesn't look right at all. So I know that there's a way to, maybe what I decided with this was I was never going to worry about whether or not they were connected. I did this a while back, so I can't remember exactly how I set it up, but I'm guessing I know there's a way to set it up so that the legs follow each other. I just don't remember how I set it. It's probably this joint right here. I'm gonna just try something real quick, since as long as we're here. I believe you grab it by the joints and then you rotate it that way. I don't know. I don't want to waste time talking about it. Take my word for it. It's a matter of setting up a rig so that the joints have a specific hierarchy. I'm going to open up the other one, and I think it'll be a little more obvious on that. And we'll see how it works. But this one's already been animated, so I'll just play the animation again, and you can just see how it looks. And then I'll go into the other version, which is just the rig itself without animation on it, and I can play around. But anyway, so all I had to do with this one was, I'll just play it, was set up the legs so that they were broken into pieces, and then the body so it's got its own separate piece. And by doing so, I was able to just go ahead and animate the legs separately. I didn't want to animate the face because I didn't want to make it too complicated, so that when other people tried playing around with it, they would find that it was simple to mess around with. So I just did this very simple little thing with the claws, made it skittle like a crab. And then, same thing, if I wanted to, I could grab the whole thing and, not the drawing, thanks, grab it all and take the whole body and make sure that, you know, I have selected everything on the body, and then have it skittling around the room, you know, like a crab. I could animate the body so that it's moving, and then you would get the effect that you have here when I've got this one. And then, like I said, I could have it, you know, moving across the room. Probably would have the legs move a little bit faster, but one of the things that is nice about limited animation is it's more forgiving. And so in a case like this, well, I mean, first of all, it was supposed to be moving through space, or perhaps you know, fluid or something like that. But generally speaking, with this sort of limited animation, it's a little bit more forgiving. You don't have to worry quite as much about whether everything is perfectly lined up with the ground, and whether it's one for one stepping on the ground. It's great if it does, if you take the time to make sure the walk is placed on the ground and everything looks great. But think about, I don't know, cartoons you remember from the 80s, if you're old enough, or even from the 90s, or even stuff that happens now. You see walk cycles and run cycles, and they don't necessarily connect with the ground. And that's because you're expecting it. With limited animation styles, you're not expecting it to be as fluid as, say, a Disney film or something like that. So anyway, so that is what we're working with here, is that kind of limited look that is expected. It wasn't expected to look really 100% fluid. All right, so I'm now going to open up the setup for this one and see if it's any different. and see if I can play around with the rig controls a little bit more. And if not, then I'll just bail and move on to the next one. But here you can see it's all, yeah, this one's got animation on it already. Yeah, so I'm not gonna, it's the same thing basically. So anyway, you can see from that first frame, you can see how it's all set up with everything created on specific layers, and with the layers ordered so that you can't see certain parts when they're supposed to be behind the character. I'm going to mess them up right now, take all the danger possible with something like this and just ruin it. So here we'll drag the body down just below the legs. Yeah, it's not going to do it because it's currently set up for armature. The thing has been rigged. It's reluctant to be messed up at this point. It's not even looking at the original layers. See this layer that's called armature? That's the one that is responsible now for the animation. It's got the rig, which is those pink lines set up. If I zoom in really tight, hopefully you can see. There it is. And then it's got the individual pieces of the rig body. So there you go. Yeah, I am just absolutely, oh, there it is. I think now if I grab the rig control part, I know you're supposed to be able to do this. Yeah, I don't want to mess with this too much because it's been so long since I did it. But once you've grabbed it, there we go. You grab the parts. Now you can see that the hierarchy is set up so that I can grab the upper leg and move it around, or I can grab the lower leg. See if I can do that here. Well, there's the joint. Ta-da! And move that around as well. Let's see if it does it. Yeah, it's not doing it. Told you it's been too long. I think with the lower leg, I think I just grabbed the lower leg and moved around that way too. So it's all good. But what I'm trying to convey, hopefully this is coming through, is that, you know, it's a pretty simple setup. There was not a lot of thought put into how I could animate this thing. There's not a lot of overlap. There's no overlap. There's no follow through. And as we enter Gangster's Paradise. And so if you set something up like this at home, you could animate this thing really quickly. You could put the rig together using the bones tool. And again, I'm not going to show you all that, but you could put it together pretty fast. And then you could have this thing up with a cycle and then just move the cycle around and animate it with an Animate CC. Or you could take this thing and render it out, put it into After Effects and animate it that way. If you know anything about After Effects, you would take the whole thing as a unit and you'd have it sliding around across your screen. At that point, you could probably also add the puppet pins tool and make it squish and stretch that way. It just is a matter of creativity. You just have to think about this stuff and how you want to set it up and what you want to do with it, what it is intended to do in advance, and then you know how to set the thing up so that it will do what you want. But for this one, obviously, it was all about the crab claws, which again, now that I finally figured it out, which you animate by grabbing the handles and moving it that way. So anyway, so that's another one. Let's look at another one of these. And while I'm opening it up, you can look again at them all. In case you haven't just joined us, we are looking at limited animation styles and stuff that's being done with economy for the purpose of being able to do it yourself or being able to do it a lot very quickly. So let's look now at Alien Animation number 3. I don't even know which one this is. I know I labeled them differently than originally, so we'll find out together. So there is, excuse me, another Alien. This one was really tricky. I had to think in terms of, well, what do I want it to do and how do I get it to do it? So the dilemma here was that, well, I wanted to open up its mouth, and I was pretty sure that I couldn't do it with a rig setup. Meaning, like with the claws, where the claws are all on different layers, and then I put it in put some bones inside of it and put it on an armature layer and then just animated the bones that way. This one also, I didn't want to go too heavy into hand-drawn animation, which would have taken a long time, but I did end up doing that. That was the solution to this. But the trick was, well, but do I have to redraw the entire face in order to get it to open its mouth, or is there a way that I could economize? I don't know why, but for some reason early on in life, I think I just got good at economizing. Maybe it's because I was lazy. I'm not going to say whether I was or not, but I was like, well, how could you do this a little cheaper? Part of it was I was watching a lot of Saturday morning cartoons and thought, well, it has a specific look. And that look is as valid as anything else, as long as you do it with purpose and creativity and care. Anyway, so this was what I was doing for this one. And in the end, it was actually pretty simple. I just broke it down into two. Well, first of all, let's look at the original drawing. Why not? But I ended up breaking it down into 2 layers. So let's see if I can hide the 2 layers. There you see, there was the original drawing that I got. And so I drew the body because I knew that part wasn't going to change. And that's kind of how I came up with the color scheme. And then I broke off the jaw, ouch, into its own separate layer, which I then placed behind the jaw. So you can see, if I, let's turn off the drawing layer, if I just play the mouth shaped, you can see it looks pretty sloppy, right? Well, that's because I knew a lot of it wasn't going to show once I had the foreground head in place. So if I just play it now, you can see it's real junky, real sloppy, but I did it quickly. I did it really fast. And one of the things I did to economize was I actually cut and pasted each of the jaws bones. In fact, it looks like there's a stray bit there that I left off, or maybe that's just an error. That when Flash is playing, when Animate CC is playing, I sometimes call it Flash by accident. When Animate CC is playing things back, sometimes it goofs up. But anyway, I just copied and pasted the points of the jaw so that they went up and down. And then I extended the line by either drawing it or just going in here and grabbing that line and pulling on it. And that's how I was able to get the line to either extend or disengage. When it's just a line here, I'll create one. When it's just a line by itself, it's a little bit easier. So I probably did this before it was colored. Once it's been colored, it won't do this. But there you can see that the line that I drew the character with is, it's flexible if I want it to be. And it depends on where you pick it up. So let's say I drew the line here, and then maybe I'll just put another couple lines in here. And so while it hasn't been colored in, I still have a lot of flexibility with it, but wherever I cross lines, it's now broken. And in fact, sometimes it's broken even in the center of a line that I just drew. And that's because it's a vector-based line. And if you go in here and take a look at it more closely, you'll see the joints of the line and how they are, it's as big as it's going to get. Anyway, you can see how they're composed of vertices, and then the lines between the vertices make up the actual line of the outside of the drawing. So that's, if you've ever messed with Illustrator, this is all old hat. If you've never messed with Illustrator, you probably ought to. You should at least play around with it and see how it works. It's fun. But because I've got an outline like this, I can go in here and I could sculpt the lines if I wanted to and make it more, make it a little bit more lush, or make it a little more smooth, or whatever I want to. And then eventually I want to go in and paint it. I'm not going to choose colors and just fill it in. There you go. Whatever color was available. But once I've done that, then it becomes harder to mess with the actual line itself. You can see it's not wanting me to already. It's already, well, let me choose the actual proper tool. Yeah, come on. You can do it. There we go. Choose the selection tool. Well, it's working now. So anyway, so you can still mess with it, but I don't advise doing that. But that's how I ended up making the mouth shape a little bit wider. But remember, I didn't have to worry about where it terminated because I knew that it was going to be hidden by the upper mouth. So I just went in and messed with the mouth that I'd drawn on frame 1. On frame 2, I made it a little lower, made it a little bit wider, and then just kept going like that until I had enough to where the mouth is going down, and then I just reversed it for the mouth to come back up. And the timing's, I think, the same. It's the same amount of frames to go down as it is to go back up. Not a lot of thought put into it. Also, too, I mean, the more and more of these I did, the more tired I got, and I was just like, it doesn't have to be. I kind of did my best work probably with the purple one with the octopus legs, and the rest of these I'm like, well, they just need to kind of fill in the background and demonstrate different ways of doing animation on the cheap. So now if I turn on the top layer and then place that top layer below the jaw layer, you'll see that, you know, it doesn't look quite right, that you can see all the work. Let me get rid of that blob. But you can see all the work that I did that wasn't meant to be seen. And truth be told, you know, it's up to you to set that stuff up. You need to actually set it up in a way that is friendly with what you're trying to do with your scene, because if you don't, you're going to spend a lot more time later trying to work it out when you're already supposed to be animating or doing moving on to the next character or something. Whereas spending a little bit of time going, oh, well, the jaw had to open. That's what the main action with this was. So all I have to do is make sure that the top jaw is hidden behind the body itself, and then make sure that the lower jaw never kind of goes outside of the line of the top jaw, and just look at each frame individually and make sure that they work. And then I've saved myself a whole bunch of extra time. I'll zoom in on this really tightly, and you can see that I've hidden everything neatly behind the top jaw, and that just required a little bit of extra effort, but I'm still saving tons of time copying, pasting everything, all those jaggedy edges. Can you imagine if you had to draw those over and over and over, which we kind of used to? But even with limited animation, like Scooby-Doo style, I call it, you could just copy and paste that stuff, but never to the level you can with this digital technology. So that's one of the joys of digital technology, is getting to reuse things and have perfectly preserved copy of the vector art on every single frame. So there's no wiggling, there's no shimmying at all. And then this character was able to put it together pretty fast. And for all intents and purposes, it looks not bad, you know, especially when you use it in a scene like I've got where everybody's doing their thing. You know, are you really looking at that every little detail of every little creature? Not necessarily, because it looks the way it does. It looks like it's limited animation, so you don't expect it to be too smooth. If it was smoother, it would be great, but it works just fine the way it is. So for what it is, it's working just fine. And then that's determination that you just make at the beginning before you even start a scene. You would talk to your supervisor, you talk to a director or a producer, whoever you're doing your work for, and just talk to them. Well, what are you expecting? What are you looking for? Do you want it to be fully fleshed out animation, or can I get away with making it a little bit more choppy? Do you specifically want that choppy look of something that's been done on 4s, that's been done in a limited way? And there's a lot of humor to be found in that look. So do you want me to find that kind of humor, or do you want it to be something a little bit more smooth and a little more feature quality? It's at least what we call it. I mean, nowadays those distinctions are getting a little bit less black and white. It's a little more gray as to what constitutes feature length, feature quality, and what's TV quality. And all of it's good, and that's something that I can't stress enough as moving into the next one is it isn't, oh, this style is good and this style is bad. It's more a matter of, well, what were you trying to communicate? What was your goal? Were you trying to do something that's very fluid? In which case, if that's what your goal was for this one, for example, it is not fluid. And so you go back to the drawing board or add more drawings, basically, which I considered doing, making it just a little more smooth, a little more fluid. But that would have required twice the amount of images that you currently see on the screen right now. And so I left it the way it was. It's good enough. It's doing what I wanted it to do, no more, no less. So it's just really important to get that stuff worked out before you even start pre-planning everything. Now, if you're just doing it for fun, you're doing it at home, well, hey, do whatever the heck you want. But as far as if you're working with someone, then you have to give them what they asked for. All right, so now just doing a quick check, make sure nobody's saying anything and I'm missing it. That's a thing. Now what I want to do is look at another creature, and this one's a little bit more complicated, a little more interesting as a result. But this is a character that has 3 parts to it. And those 3 parts are the head and the middle part of the body, and then the base of the body. If I play it, you can see what it's doing. And again, this has been rigged with an armature inside the body. So I'll probably go back and look at the setup of it. And maybe that'll show us how it worked. But basically it comes down to there were 3 separate parts. And depending on which layer was on top is what you'll see in the foreground, and then what's underneath will look like it's a little bit further away. In perspective, perhaps slightly. But yeah, let me open up the original if I still can find it, and see what the original drawing looked like, perhaps. Hopefully it's in there, and also what the options were when creating this thing. So it's opening up now, but as I open it, we'll just play this a couple more times. And see how it kind of undulates. So the idea was I wanted to get something that looked a little bit more snake-like, but did not require going through and drawing every single drawing. So I'm gonna just try this one more time. It's reluctant to open. You'll find that happens. You'll get programs that get irritated with you and don't want to be open. And I think part of the problem is that this may be exactly the same thing as I had open before. So if that's the case, we'll just work with it. But really, the main thing that I wanted to stress was in this case, it was created out of 3 joints, and 3 joints only. I think what I'll do is maybe I'll just get rid of the armature layer, and you guys can see if you're interested in that. You can see how it was sitting. Nah, it's not going to let me do that. If I get rid of the armature, it'll get rid of the whole thing. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. You can see it. You can see that there are 3 distinct layers, and that they're set up so that I can grab the entire body, like so, and rotate it. I can also theoretically move it, but not right now. And then there's this second joint, which is the middle part. See, it's kind of clunky. It's not really the most rationally, logically set up thing in the world, but it does its job all right. And then there's the third joint, which is this one down here, which is probably just rotated. I don't think I actually translate that one at all. But really simple setup, really easy to manipulate this thing. You can see that if you rotate it too far, it breaks, and so that was part of the way it was set up. Is I drew these edges so that it can only be rotated so far, and it looks pretty clean. And again, that's just part of the fun when you're doing limited stuff, is you have to play around with it and figure out, well, what can it do, what can't it do? In theory, I could probably animate this so that it squashes and stretches a little bit, and that might make it look more disgusting and fun. But that would require keyframing certain parts of it. And same thing with the top part. You could, in theory, you could animate this moving around and getting all squishy and stretchy. And that's a little bit more what I would probably do in Toon Boom. But for my purposes here, it works really well to just have a bone set up. Well, here, now you can see I translate the 3 parts. There you go. There are the 3 levels that I used. You can see the edges. I didn't draw pencil lines so that when it rotated, it wouldn't be quite as glaring and obvious. You can see that there's the thick part on the outside. And then the part that connects to the body is thinner. Let's put that back now. And that way when I rotate the thing, it doesn't break as much, unless it breaks. It's doing it right now. Here we go. So grab that circle. Oh, using the wrong control, that's why. Grab the circle and then rotate it that way, and it will not break. It will just rotate with the hierarchy that I set up for it. Well, thanks, Oscar. I'm glad that you love the expression. Nice to see you again. That we can get out of it. It's kind of rude, actually, but it does its job. All right. Yeah, as you can see, though, I haven't messed with this in a long time. So once you get into the flow of it, it actually goes really quickly. And like I said, you can animate these pretty well. But with this one, I was trying to do it really fast. And so you can see that there are a lot of things that could conceivably go wrong with it. So what if, for example, you animated it, I don't know, like this, and you bent it so far that you could see the edges of it? Well, you're going to lose that little tentacle. And then you know, the edges of it, it just doesn't look like it was meant to bend quite that much. So that's one of the things that you got to worry about when you're creating it. This thing does not hold up. If I play it close like this, you'll see the edges of it. Let's repeat that and frame it up a little bit better. You'll see that the edges break eventually. But I set it up in a way that it was meant to rotate a specific amount, and as long as I rotated only that specific amount, everything was good. Let's go back and make this run the entire length of the scene so you can watch it going over and over and over again. So what you're seeing is basically I animated the body to go up and down, and then the middle body to rotate a little bit, and then the third digit of the body to rotate a little bit. But so each one of them is on a separate layer and can be manipulated individually, but they're all set up with a bone hierarchy on the armature layer, which is, you can see that on my screen, it's blue, so that all I had to do was translate stuff, and that would get it to move. But of course it's being difficult today because it's just working out that way. But anyway, there you go. So there's the head on its own separate level. So one of the things that you do when you are wanting to work with this particular style is you want to just think about it ahead of time. And that's kind of, if there's an overriding issue that happens with rigged characters like this or with limited animation, is you just have to plan it all in advance. Again, you can go in and you can do stuff on the fly for yourself, but when you're animating purposefully, when you're trying to get something across, if you're doing it for a show or a director or supervisor, then you have to know what the character is supposed to do ahead of time and then set it up. And so that's what I did with all of Brandon's characters. And I'll just pull that setup again. There's a setup of all of them. I'll just pull that one open so you can see what, well, no, it's not there. Now see what I was dealing with in the first place, and how each one of them was going to be set up in a specific way based on how they looked. So here we go. Nope. Sorry, I had it handy a minute ago. Now it's run off. I told you things were going to happen today as a result of being invaded by aliens. But anyway, so this was, you know, what I was looking at least the drawn version of it, and looking at this and going, well, okay, what do I want each one of them to be able to do? And so I'm talking about number 5 right now. Again, you're seeing the final colored version here on the screen, but the original rough drawing was just like, well, what should it be able to do? Well, it's snake-like. It should be able to undulate like a snake. But how do I do that without actually going in and animating it by hand with all those stripes? And how do I make it look like it's undulating on the cheap and do it in a way that might still look fun, but is not frame animation hand drawn on every single frame like I did with the octopus tentacles on creature number 1 up in the upper left hand corner. So that's where this came from. Let's hide that, I'll bring it back later. And this was the end result of separating it into 3 distinct digits and then animating it digitally. So, you know, animating each digit individually with the armature tool so that it stays connected, but it also kind of undulates. Again, this is not the most exciting thing in the world as far as the look of it. It would be much more smooth and much more much more languid, and you could get in there and you could do all the little tentacles and stuff on it too if you drew it hand by hand, but it would also take about 10 times as long, right? And by the time you're done, you would have the same thing. You would have this thing that's kind of undulating on the screen, and when you show it along with all the other creatures, you know, unless you're specifically going to go through and tear each one of them apart, which you would do, you know, if you wanted to do it for a show or something, you know, it's doing its thing. It looks kind of like it's undulating and going up and down. And if I again grab it and had it moving across the screen, say, you know, it could go flying across the screen, and it gives the illusion that it's actually propelling itself, and maybe goes up or down or whatever. But you know, that too I would have planned ahead of time, and that's why I don't have them moving in specific ways, is because I didn't really plan it out that way. I probably would rotate them or tilt them or do something, you know, with the actual direction of them if I wanted it to go sailing across the screen a certain way, pre-planning, setting that stuff in advance. So this is working for what I wanted it to do, which is just a cycle of the thing, just kind of flipping around. I could go in there and animate it and make it do more things, but it's certainly doing fine the way it is. So that is this one. Let's go ahead and I'll leave it all of them on the screen while I open up another one and see the different challenges that come with each of them. That's kind of the goal. So let's open up another one here. I will share it with you on my screen as soon as it's open. As per usual, I've forgotten which ones are which, so the numbers of them don't add up to the actual numbers I showed you on the screen. Okay, that's the COVID one. I'm not going to show that. Let's look at number 3 and see if that one is all set up and ready. I know we also got rid of the one that's over on the far left, the one that's got a brain and or eyeballs inside of a glass head. So I might not have that one available to play with after all. In which case there's only one left, I think. So I'll try opening one more and then just move on and talk about other things. Because that's kind of the gist of what I wanted to talk about as far as these Animate CC critters go, is just wanted to do sort of a real gentle overview of how each one of them has separate functions, and so you plan that into the setup of the actual creature itself. So here I've got one. Let me share my screen with you now, and you can see this is the one that's on the upper left-hand corner, the purple thing with the eyes. This was probably the easiest one of all, and I'm pretty sure I did it last for that very reason, because I'd run out of energy. So basically all this one was pupils on one layer and the rest on another layer. Let me hide everything, see if I got the drawing available, which I don't. Okay, great. But so here you go. If I take off the eye level, you can see, so there was just the body, and then I added the eyes. And then I used a little bit different method on this one. I'd use the armature for the others. So that means I was creating a bone hierarchy so that, you know, the wrist is connected to the elbow, it's connected to the shoulder or whatever. And then they're all connected to the center of the body. So if I move the center of the body, the arms will go with it. But I can also operate each individual part separately. Again, I'm going to go into this with a lot more detail later at another time. These are just like the quickest, hackiest things I could come up with. They were designed for high school students who wanted it fast and easy. And so I thought, well, what's the easiest way to get into it really quickly? So these are some simple setups. So this one, obviously, like I said, is the simplest of all. All I did was I had the eyes on their own light layer. So I'll turn this off. And you can see, I just moved them as a unit. So all the eyes are doing is they're just moving around as a unit. I drew them in one position and then used Animate CC's tween function, which you can see if I zoom in on the timeline a little bit, you can see those purple sections. Those are tweened sections, and it's something that Animate CC does really well. That is what Flash used to be, is you could set up a, oh, no problem, Sean. Nice to see you again. Thanks for stopping by. But in the olden days, what you'd do is you would create things in Flash, and then you would make an object out of them. So if I select this, you can see, hopefully if it's not locked, you can see that if I select this, it is one complete object in and of itself. There are no individual parts to these eyes, and that's where it got tricky, was because if you moved them outside of their boundaries, then it's going to show. But I can't select each one of these. I could if I broke it apart. So if I just break this layer apart, I'm just going to mess it up. I don't want to mess it up too much. But anyway, just modify it and break it apart. Then I can select each one of the eyes individually, and maybe we would want to do that. But that's not how I wanted to do it for this. So there you go. So if I turn on the body layer, I could conceivably put each one of these on its own separate layer and animate them so that they're moving around individually. But again, I just wanted to come up with something really fast and really down and dirty and easy. So instead, I made them into a group by just going modify and then group, convert to symbol actually. You could group them, but I convert it to a symbol. And a symbol is something that you can then use as an entire unit. So when I select it, you can see there's a bounding box square around it. That just means that it is now functional as a unit. So the eye pupils all good. Oh, you're welcome, Sean. You're welcome to come and stop by anytime. I'm here all night. Well, I'm here for another half hour. And then the videos will be available to watch later if you're so inclined. But yeah, I could scale this, squash and stretch it, do whatever I want to once it's been grouped. But once I had it grouped, I could see that I would have to keep it within the confines of a specific realm, if you will. Grab the selection tool again. To move it, then I would have to keep it within a certain area, or else it was going to jump out of the eyeball themselves. So now if you look at this thing playing at speed, you can see that I specifically went through and made sure that each of the pupils, well, they run off by the end, but here I'll just script through it at the beginning so that they stay within the confines of the lines that I drew for the outside of the eyes. And then they're just tweened. So it's just, there's one frame here on whatever frame this is, there's one frame, and then there's another, so it's on frame 20, I placed a key. On frame 24, I placed a key, and then you just right mouse click and you do a classic tween. So if I remove it now, it won't have any in-betweens anymore. But I just created a motion tween in the classic style which is just animate CC, formerly Flash, is interpolating between two frames the shortest possible distance. It just says, oh, go from A to B. And that worked really well for the eyes because they just are going to go A to B, A to B, A to B, or A, B, B, C, C, D, D to A. So that's just creating a motion tween in between each section of the animation, and then deciding, well, how many times do I want it to move? Where do I want it to move? What do I want the actual action to look like? That was all done with pre-planning and just deciding all these things in advance. Right? How long do I want it to last so that it looks like it's looking around? And because it's motion tweening, I get everything on ones. So one of the things that is either a plus or a minus, depending on how you look at it with any digital program, is when you ask the program to do in-betweens for you, it will do them on ones. Ones, it looks really smooth. Ones, it also looks really robotic sometimes and really floaty if you're not careful. So I specifically animated this so that it would move quickly and then stop on a dime. Compare this one to the first one that I showed you guys. We started with the octopus-looking thing, where it would go too far and then bounce back, and that created a little more of a rubbery look to the eyes. Well, I didn't get to do that with this one because I just had two layers and wasn't doing anything else to it other than that. So now if I go back and play these all again, you can see the difference. Look at the one in the upper corner with all the eyes, and then look at the one in the upper corner with just two eyes that are darting all around. And you can see the different looks that they have. One has a really squash and stretch look to it, and the other one is just moving from A to B to A to B and not doing a lot of squash and stretch. So that was just a result of one is just two layers. One is the body and the eyes. That's the one with all the circle of eyes. And then the other one, this one, this one is the one with the two layers, and then the one with separate frames for each action is this one that I'm pointing at right now. So the eyes, were in between, so they went too far and then came back, and that gives you that boingy look. So two different attempts to do two different things while staying within the realm of limited animation and while trying to do this on the fast track and do it cheap. One thing that I will mention is I don't have this file handy, so I can't really look at it, but the one that is here, the one with the eyeballs inside of the glass, that what you're looking at is similar to what I did over with this one, in that the metal-legged armatures, while they're set up just like the one that's in blue, the one with the blue crab legs, it's set up the same, but rather than having multiple joints, it only has one joint that attaches at the base of the body. And then I did the same thing I did with the purple one, which is with the eyes with the purple one, which is I went too far and then came back. And that gives it this kind of mechanical rigid look. So the legs have this sort of like robotic thing. And that's, again, just going one pose too far. Well, I'll turn off some of these extras. It's number 3. We'll just look at that one. Since, again, I don't have this one available as a file, but it's just animating it so that there's one key on the ground, and then one key that goes too far, and then one key that's landed. And the key that goes too far is only on screen for a couple frames. So it goes up, and then up and then down, and then holds there for a really long time. And then same thing when it goes down, it goes too far and then comes back. And that's how you get this robot look. I don't know if that's working with my fingers. Again, I hope somebody's going to take this video and make a viral meme out of it saying I was stupid or something. But that's how you end up getting the look of something that's like very robotic and rigid. You go a little too far and then come back. I did not do that for the other one, that's the crab leg one, which is right here. Let me turn off everybody else but those two. You can see the difference between the two of them. in how they move. I wanted the one that's blue to look a little more smooth and to have more articulation with its joints, so it's a little bit more like it's moving through water, whereas the other one was clearly metal, and so I wanted to have a metallic robotic look to the actual animation itself. Truth be told, I started out by separating the different joints and articulating it, and I just didn't think it looked all that good. So I thought it'd be a lot more fun to have this thing looking more robotic, since it just looked that way in the way that it was designed originally. And again, this thing could be made to move faster and go crawling across your screen, or it could float through space like this, which is what I think the original idea was. These things were all floating through space. But however you get there, it's got to be something that you did deliberately. It has to be something that's your choice. You don't want to leave these things up to chance. Maybe when you're experimenting, when you're first starting out, then you want to play around and just see what you come up with. But at a certain point, become savvy enough to kind of go, well, I want it to look this way on purpose, and so I'm going to animate it so that it has either a robotic look, or it has a little bit more of a smooth look, and then those things are all done specifically, and you planned them before you started. So that was key to all of these. I had the designs, then I just had to look at them, as you see on my screen right now, look at the still versions of them, and make a determination about what I wanted them to do, and set them up so that people could play with them and make them animate any old which way they wanted to. All right, so let's go back now to this one, and I started talking about this a little bit before, but I'm going to go on a little more about it now. One of the joys of Animate CC, and one of the pains about Animate CC, is the vector style that you're drawing with when you're working with characters in this program. So you saw that I had the original drawings, which I don't know where this one went. Oh, there it is. Yeah, yay. So you saw that I had the original drawings, and when you're working with this program, you're talking about going over roughs with a nice pen and ink line. So let's see if I can even do it right now. Yeah. Unlock it, please. Thanks. So there we go. It's yellow. Let me see if I can get another color going here. But the nice thing about like a program like Toon Boom is that you have the ability to change your colors. Sorry, to changing my colors and saying it out loud. You have the ability to draw rough and draw clean in the same program. And wouldn't that be nice, is to be able to go in and do nice color, sorry, I keep saying that, to do nice pencil drawings that are really nice and soft, and that echo something like a pencil if you were actually trying to draw with the pencil. Whereas here, we're stuck with a really clean pen vector line, and there are pros and cons to that, but I wouldn't use it when I was doing my rough animation. So for years, before I actually got onto a program like Toon Boom, for years I was actually drawing in this program, trying to do my animation that way. And for every pro you get when you can go in here like I did before and take a look at this and go, ooh, I can make my lines thicker, or I can actually mess with my lines and do all sorts of fun things with it. For every pro like that, there are a million cons, to where sometimes I just want to be able to draw nice and loose, and that is not what this is for. Animate CC was not meant to do those loose kinds of drawings. It was meant to do vector drawings. And if you don't want to do vector drawings, then too bad. I know people who draw in this program who draw very loosely as a general rule. I mean, that's just the way they draw anyway. But for me, this is not the program to draw loosely in. So just something to think about when you're wanting to get up and running on a program, when you want to get used to the program itself. If I was going to draw for this character, I could go in here and lay down a line. Oh my God. I could lay down a line pretty simply and pretty cleanly, but is that the actual line that I wanted to have? Or did I actually want to go in and sketch something and do something really, free and loose, and then go in with an eraser and get rid of parts of it? Sorry, that's a pencil. Get rid of it and have a nice smudge line like you could do with Harmony. No, that's not going to happen here. You're dealing with vectors. You're dealing with lines that are actually created out of individual strokes. And as such, each of the strokes can be manipulated, and you can do all sorts of fun things with it, but it's still always going to be a stroke. And so you have to be sort of careful when you're playing around with this stuff. And always be aware of the fact that you're dealing with individual components. None of this adds up to an individual drawing. So that's why, just for my purposes, I use this for cleanup, or I used to. I don't even use it for cleanup anymore. I use Toon Boom now when I'm doing my cleanup passes, because it's just easier to stay in one program. But so I draw it in rough in Toon Boom, and then I go in and clean it up in Toon Boom as well. But it used to be, in the olden days, I would do cleanup work in a program like Animate CC, or I would even use Illustrator, and then I would export those vector drawings into another program. For example, you can now, well, now it's been a long time now, but you can go into Photoshop Motion and you can export all of your sequence of images that you drew in another program and then have them play at speed there. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you could. By contrast, you could also take drawings that you made in Photoshop, say you've done a lot of airbrushing, or you've got a lot of tones and highlights and things. You could export them as a sequence and then bring them into Animate CC and gather them and play them out like that. But boy, there are a lot easier ways to do that now than there used to be. So for those of you who are just getting started and this is your first encounter with something like this, count your lucky stars that you no longer have to do all that exporting, and that you can actually just go in and work in one single program and do everything that you wanted to do in there, and not have to worry so much about, well, now I've created it, what am I going to do with it, and how am I going to get it to move? But you can see how quickly I'm just drawing these lines. I'm just doing this for fun, just to show how easy it really is to create vector lines once you've got a really nice clean rough, which again is what I got with Brandon's drawings. It helps a lot. And then this is just a recommendation for anybody who's interested in doing their own stuff, is the more clean you draw in the rough stage, the easier life's going to be when you're doing your cleanup pass. I've said this in other streams, but it bears repeating, it bears going on and on about, which is a little bit of time that you spend in advance equals a lot of time later that you may save if you draw really clean for your tie-down pass for your animation. And obviously these are not animation drawings, these were just still drawings that I was given, and then I was tasked with figuring out how to make them move. But when you're working on your own animation, at some point you're going to probably want to clean up your own stuff. So it behooves you, that's an old-fashioned 50-cent word, to think in advance about what it is that you want to do with your work. Do you want to clean it up really tightly, or are you going to leave it really loose? How are you going to want to work with that? One of the other time-saving things that I did I started to say cost-saving, but one of the time that didn't cost me anything, but one of the things that was time-saving was using things like the oval tool. And by using the oval tool, I could go in and lay down an actual physical shape Usually what I'll do is I'll do it on the side and try to match the shape as close as I can. I'll also color it so that it doesn't have anything in the middle. But I'm just leaving it colored for today. Then I'll just delete the color, it's faster. And then place it over the object and then try to match it that way. If it's too big, it's too small, then I can always just scale it. My cursor's a little bit off, bear with me here for a minute, I need to recalibrate. Actually, I just need to open it up again. This happens periodically. But anyway, I can transform this and I can scale it by going into edit. It's just not wanting to do that for me right now. Anyway, so I can scale it, but I can move it. I can do all sorts of things to it if I want to, and make it match what you see on the screen. Make it match exactly. So that's one more time-saving device, is just making sure that you use tools that already exist in the program. So the circle one was one tool that was available. Another one is squares, or I could do octagons. And then once you've got it created, you can match it however you like. So just pulling on things. So when I was creating this, I drew a lot of lines and then would morph those lines. So just for fun, just now I was drawing them freehand. But if I went back and did this the right way, probably what I'd do is I would use lines. So there's a line tool, and you just start on one edge and then continue on to the next, and just keep that going until you've got all the lines. And then what I did after that was I went through and I varied the line a little bit, the quality of it a little bit. Don't do that. So that the lines weren't perfectly even. I especially did that on the teeth. I'll do that next. But you can see, so there's the line that I actually created, and then you go in here and play with the quality of that line a little bit, make it bulge and distort in certain places to give it a little more character. I believe I did that for the center lines for sure. Maybe not, but you could. But for the teeth, that's where I actually went in and I would, to try and capture the quality of the lines that I was given, went in and pulled on those a little bit and gave them a little more character so they looked a little more interesting and weren't just straight lines, which wouldn't have been very interesting at all, kind of drab. So those are some of the advantages of working with vector lines. That is probably the main advantages, is that you know, if you look at my drawings on the screen that you can see, look at the difference between this line, which is real sloppy. I mean, I turned the smoothness way down, and I probably would turn it up if I was drawing freehand. But look at the difference between that and then look at this one. And then you can change the thickness and do all sorts of things to it. You can make it, you know, thicker, thinner. I could do them all universally. That actually did happen at one point. I was like, oh, I want the outside lines to be a lot more thick than the inside lines. So I could just go into the properties and make it thicker. And so that's one of the many advantages to working with vector lines. But, you know, imagine if you wanted to give this some character, you probably would have to just go in and draw it. And you might never get the kind of subtlety that the thicks and thins that you can get by drawing with a pencil, where you can build up a line and make it really nice and thick. So that's why I say it has its pros and cons. And I don't really use Animate CC too often anymore because I've completely crossed over to Toon Boom. But for doing something like this, these creatures that I've been working with today, it was ideal. And it was fun to be limited by the parameters that I had with Animate CC, where it's like, no, you have to do it in a way that is limited, which again, I'll just keep showing these guys, where, all right, you've got certain parameters. You cannot draw every single frame. Each one of these has to be retain its solid shape. I don't have time, I don't have energy to draw every single one of them over and over again for everything that they do. So how do I economize? How do I take parts of them and just either copy and paste them or leave them completely frozen, so it's one solid object on its own layer. And then what parts do I have to use the tweener, which is just taking two keys and interpolating between them. And then what are the parts where I use the armature, which is I've set up a bone structure underneath the drawing layers so that I can rotate certain parts using a joint system and a hierarchy with rotating certain joints. And then what parts can I just have on separate frames, but in a very limited way, like you would find if you did hand-drawn 2D animation, the kind of stuff you see in Disney features of old and certain films even today. So again, just to reiterate, this all comes from planning and deciding what are my resources, what do I have available. Well, in this case, I had Animate CC. I mean, I had a directive to use it, but I had Animate CC at my disposal, and I wanted to show some of the different things that it can do and do it quickly and create animation that was lively, if nothing else, but done quickly and on the cheap. And so probably I would do a lot more like the purple one. If I had the time, if I was actually doing a job, I would do, and I didn't have to do all of these by myself, which if I were to do them all by myself, I would probably have like all day to do it every day on a job. But with the limited amount of time that I was able to dedicate to this, I was able to do at least one of them that had some squash and stretch to it and had some full life to it. And I would do that with the rest of them if I had the ability to. But they were all still done really quickly. I don't know how long it took, but they were done rather quickly. And if I got in there and animated them and had them doing funny little things, then that would kind of show what they were capable of doing as well. So I guess the bottom line with this sort of thing is you're only limited by your imagination. You're limited by your resources and your imagination. I always talk about the fact that when I first started out, I was using flipbooks. And when I saw what I could do with flipbooks, I thought I could actually make an entire film just using flipbooks. So I had a bouncing ball. I think I had a little dog that bounced. I had a walk cycle that I created based on a Disney walk that I saw in the Illusion of Life book. And, just kept building these up, these little 50 frame pieces of animation that were on flipbooks. And I thought, well, if I ran them all back to back, eventually I would have a story. And that is the same thing that is true with limited animation is, a couple cycles like this, if I put these all together in a scene and had them moving all around, for a good 2 or 3 seconds, you probably wouldn't even question it. If these were all floating through a scene and I had some After Effects-y bubbles or something in the background, and it was against a nice background, or maybe even better yet, a 3D background. But these things were, these things were floating around and doing things, even though they were cycling, it would still look pretty cool. And it wasn't a lot of work to put it together. And the results were, would be if I had effects and did it so that they all looked like they belonged in the scene, the color scheme, if it fit. It wouldn't be as much work, nearly as much work as if I actually drew them by hand and animated each little bit that they're doing over and over and over relative to where they were in the scene. That would take hours and hours and hours and weeks probably. This, I can tell you, it didn't take more than a couple days, 2 or 3 days, and I wasn't working full-time on it. I had other things that I was working on as well. So it was very feasible, and I didn't get that burnout factor, and that's something I'm going to kind of finish with, is when you're setting out to do your own animation, you have to consider the time length that you have before you're going to run out of energy or interest. Sorry, let's move that one out of the way. So when you're working on a project, there's a burnout factor. There just is. There are some people I know of. I noticed that another animator was referencing Michel Gagne's Twisted Rabbits, which, come to think about it, some of these look a little like that. Maybe Brandon's seen them. I was there when Michel was developing the Twisted Rabbits, as well as Dave Kupchak. And um, people like Michelle, and I'll just give a shout out, they are not completely human. They have the kind of focus, dedication, and stamina. I don't know if he still does, but I mean, he's working on Rex, the saga of Rex, and going frame by frame. But they have the kind of stamina that is very unusual, and there's no secret as to why people like that succeeded in the industry from a very early stage. The look that Michelle did with effects can be seen in 2D films to this day. He started out being influenced by the effects work of anime, and I think anime is probably now affected by the look that he created, but putting effects on ones and giving it this real character. But even he has his limits, and so even though he created his films hand by hand, like I believe it's Prelude to Eden, that's the one he was working on when I knew him, which turned out it's gorgeous. You can look it up online, Michel Gagne, Prelude to Eden. But unless you're someone like that, for the rest of us, it's really hard to get a film made. Prelude to Eden, I think, is 3.5, 4 minutes. My film was 5 minutes, and it was all limited animation because I did it all myself, and it was the best I could do. I was more concerned with story. I wasn't as involved in trying to make something beautiful, which is what Michel excelled at. And I mean, his story is good too, so there's no knock against that, but I was really strictly just interested in doing a limited animation piece, like something you'd see with Charlie Brown or Bakshi or TV animation, but with a little bit of an edge to it, but with a story, with an idea. That was what I was focusing on. With Michel, he was focusing on the art of it and trying to do things that hadn't been done before, and he succeeded. But again, for the rest of us mere mortals, you have to gauge how much time you have, how much energy you have, what your resources are in terms of money and equipment. Do you have anybody helping you? Michel had a lot of people help him with his films. I think he's doing the current one all by himself, but originally he had help, and it still took a long time. It still took a couple years to get it off the ground. So you have these limitations. You have to ask yourself, if I want to do this, do I wait until I have all the resources I need, or do I just go out and make my dang film? And that's was my attitude. Is I'm just going to make a film, and then hopefully when I'm done with that, make another, and make another, and make another. And I did for a while. And so that's one of the plus sides of doing limited animation with rigs. Set up a limited animation rig that is specific to just exactly what you want to do, and you can spend a lot more time on the animation itself. And you're not going frame by frame and drawing every single drawing in a film that, think about it again, 24 frames per second, roughly 24 to 30 now video, or CG animation, and then you have to do at least every other drawing. So for 1 second of film, it's 24 frames, and so if you only do every other one, that's still 12 drawings. We were expected to do about 1 drawing an hour when we cleaned it up at Disney and DreamWorks, and so do the math. You're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours to do even something using characters like this. Even these characters would take you a long time if you were looking at it, doing something really nice. I didn't even draw these. I didn't sketch them. I mean, I just cleaned them up and colored them. If I had sketched them from scratch, it would have taken me a lot longer. So none of this is actually meant to be urging you to not do it. What I'm just saying is maybe you want to try doing something that's simple animation where only parts are moving, and you can do it with Animate CC if you've got Adobe, or if you want to invest in another program, you can do it that way. But then you may find that you're able to put your animation piece out there and get some feedback and go on to the next one without having spent half of your life putting together a film, by which time the technology changes anyway. Anyway, so that's what I've been talking about today, and this is just a one-off that I was doing. I'll come back with this topic in the future, hopefully with an actual rig that I'm looking forward to showing off, again using Brandon's design. But for now, this has just been a little talk about limited animation and simple rigs that you too could do if you've got Animate CC or something equivalent, vector-based in motion-based Photoshop. You can do it with Photoshop too. But that's about all I'm going to say on the subject today. I hope that you've enjoyed this if you made it all the way through, or if you were just listening with it in the background. And hopefully you learned a little something perhaps about this stuff. At the very least, you got to see Brandon's awesome rigs and saw what I did with them in a very limited way. And maybe I'll come back to them and play with them in the future. But next up, I'll probably go back and do some more 2D stuff. If you join me here next week, I'm here every week at this time for 2 hours. And please feel free to add any questions or comments that you like at any time. And always appreciate people who make comments and are repeat offenders. But beyond that, this is Scott Claus for CG Spectrum signing off for today. Hope you have a great week, and stay safe and sane, and take care of yourselves. And good night.